we discussed Dr. Baker previously. He's an orthopedic surgeon. How he got into this, he started changing people's diets when they're coming in having horrible joint pain, horrible arthritis. They're getting worked up to get a joint replacement. He said, hey, if you change your diet like this, you can actually help your symptoms and and it wasn't even like all pure carnivore at that point. It was more sort of heavy meat based, Paleolithic, keto sort of thing. And he found that people were actually really improving so much that they didn't actually need joint replacements anymore. And he was very happy with that because he's an actual doctor and he cares about his patients and he wants the best for them. He doesn't just want to make money cutting people open. And so, but his practice, wanted to make money. They didn't just want to bill, a few $100s for the consultation. They wanted to bill tens of thousands of dollars for a joint replacement. And so he wasn't pulling in as much money. And so they got pissed. And so they drove him out because it's, that was their want. A friend of mine here in Australia, Dr. Gary Fettke, he did the
Hmm.
exact same thing. He did it. He was working in the public system though, and so there wasn't anybody worried about him not bringing in money from the private practice side of things. But he didn't. He did it actually quite subtly and in a clever way, where he told people, "Okay, we'll sign you up for your joint replacement. Here's your date. It's going to be about 3 months, and until then, you need to be on this diet, which would be a very high fat, meat based ketogenic diet, if not a full carnivore diet, but at least a ketogenic diet. So you need to be on this diet until then to get you ready for surgery, to get you have the best outcome possible." And he said that quite often people were able to do this. They'd call him up after 2 months and say, "Hey, doc, my shoulder doesn't hurt anymore. I don't think I need surgery." He said, "Okay, no problem. We'll just, we're here if you need us, and if you have a problem again, we'll sign you up. Don't worry about it." And he said he got numbers of people off of off the surgery list just naturally, just by changing their diet. And he was also one of the few people willing to do amputations,
Hmm.
cutting off diabetic feet and legs. It's not a nice operation, and it's these are very sick people. And hearing as he was describing the sort of the sound of human foot dropping into a trash can, it's a really disturbing sound, and it's not nice. And so he's like, okay, there has to be something better than this. There has to be a better way of doing this. And he found putting people on a high fat meat based ketogenic diet actually reversed their diabetes. We know this now from clinical trials, and we have Steve Finney, Professor Finney in America with was it Verta Health. They've published controlled trials showing that you can reverse type 2 diabetes with a high fat meat based ketogenic diet, and a clean whole foods one. And now they've worked with over 25,000 uh, diabetics in America and potentially around the world, but they've reversed over 25,000 people of type 2 diabetes. So this is, and other groups have done 35,000. And I've had my own patient cohort that I've only seen it go the other way, reversing diabetes just in my patient population as well. So, this is well established now. I mean, this is not a fluke. And so he was finding this as well. And he was also finding that people didn't need joint replacements nearly as much. And he was finding that they, all of a sudden, he could actually stop the progression of their, diabetic illnesses. And sometimes they wouldn't need the amputation anymore, or they'd need a much reduced amputation. Instead of getting their whole foot and losing their ankle, they just got, the front part of their foot and the toes removed, because the body was healing and it was able to recover even at that point when it was so far gone. And for his efforts, he got attacked by the cereal companies. They even named him by name in some of their board meetings, which were then later sued for. They got access to them, and they said this damn ketogenic movement is killing our cereal sales. So we need to shut it down. We need to fight this. We need to identify these different doctors and people, then and get their license taken away and get them discredited and get them thrown off of social media and things like that. I mean, just wretched people. They're talking about destroying people's lives in order to boost their cereal sales. I mean, these people should be in prison for doing this sort of thing, going after people like that unfairly. I mean, we really should be in prison for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Actually, yeah. And
yeah.
I think it was his wife who did the investigation
Yeah.
then, who was behind all of that. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And so sort of, broke the case open on who were the people pulling the strings behind the scene, who were the people that founded the cereal companies and the processed food companies, and why they did that. It was actually for religious purposes. They thought it was evil to eat meat because it causes lustful feelings, and so you need to just stop eating meat. And this is so now you have this religious ideology that actually founded the processed food industry. They still own it. They still own a lot of these cereal companies, and they work very closely with the other ones. And so now you have a religious ideology founded in the 1800s in the Victorian puritanical sort of era that is now still worried about that and still wants to push that ideology. But now they've got a multi-trillion-dollar industry behind them to help fund this. And so they're the ones putting out a lot of nutritional research. They're the ones, working with Coca-Cola and Kellogg's. They invented Kellogg's. Dr. Kellogg's, was part of this, and they have all these institutions, and they're doing the peer reviewing, right? So they're the ones looking at this, going like, oh yes, yes, this is definitely the right thing. So we'll publish that straight away. Ooh, that one. Ooh, I don't know. That one's we don't like that one. That doesn't align with our ideology. So maybe that one doesn't get approved. And so it's eminently corrupt, and so they mess with the wrong people basically, because Dr. Chaffee was not going down without a fight, and his wife was very confused as to why the hell the Australian Dietetics Association, the head of the Australian Dietetics Association, whose main funders are Sanitarium Foods, which are the major cereal producers here in Australia, why the head of the ADA would personally call the head of this local hospital in Tasmania to say, you need to shut this guy up. You need to shut him down, and you need to get him out of there. And they tried. And they tried to get his license taken away and tell him that he's never allowed to ever give advice that someone go on ketogenic diets. And they actually tried to go a little bit too far, because um, they said even if a ketogenic diet becomes the standard of care and standard practice and even best practice, you're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to advise people on it. And it's just like, hold on a second. If this is accepted by the medical establishment and in the guidelines as best practice, I'm still not allowed to use it. It's just me, right? So it's obviously this was a personal vendetta, and that was ultimately their downfall, because they overreached, and people were able to look at that and go like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And
Mm.
so they shut it down, and they said, of course he can give dietary advice. He's a doctor, he can. That's what you're supposed to do. And now, which is from the help of a friend of his and a friend of ours, Dr. James Mukey. He was Australian of the Year in 2020 for his work and his charity. He's an ophthalmologist, so he's working in treating eye diseases around the world.
Hmm.
He was asked to be on the commission for the new guidelines for diabetes, and so he was like, oh, okay. And he understood about the low carbohydrate ketogenic data and how this was reversing diabetes. And so he fought tooth and nail to get that on. And there were a lot of other people that fought against him, presumably or potentially people that had conflicts of interest and were on payrolls for processed food and drug companies and things like that. But he fought and fought and fought, and he won. And now a ketogenic diet is the considered best practice for treating diabetes in Australia. So now it's actually made a bit of headway, which is fantastic, because it does help people and it does work. And so now people are actually protected, and they say, okay, well, I can use this with my patients, and this is standard of care. This is best practice. This is said to be best practice, and we're getting the best results as well. And so it's we had to have some trailblazers who really had to fight and struggle through some misery to get us to where we are. But thankfully for their sacrifices, we're at a point now that, at least in Australia, it's actually best practice to treat diabetes with a ketogenic diet. So I think it's going in the right direction anyway, and hopefully we can just keep moving this in other countries as well, because it works.
Yeah.
And at least of all, we can at least get other clinicians and patients to understand this, and then they can just do it themselves. Because they get to decide what they eat, and not eating a bunch of processed garbage is never a bad idea. And then just taking it one step further and understanding what humans actually evolved on, what we actually are biologically designed for, and what we actually require as far as nutrition is concerned, it takes you even further. And so, just very thankful for people like Dr. Fettke and James Mukey and Dr. Baker for, setting the, sacrificing themselves to sort of, set us on the right path.
Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
Right, yeah. And you're one of those doctors now too.
No,
Yeah,
trying to be anyway.
On that way there. Well, I didn't know that in Australia, the ketogenic diet has really been acknowledged as a safe way to go with diabetes. Yeah, that
Yeah,
really
it's
sounds
it's
great.
it's it's pretty new. In the last couple years, it got onto the guidelines as a treatment for diabetes. It was part of the guidelines is ketogenic diets. But just this year, actually just a few months ago, it was listed as best practice for treating diabetes because it works, and it works a hell of a lot better than a bunch of drugs. And those drugs can work in concert with this diet, but eventually you can come off those medications for
Mm-hmm.
most people.
Yeah, yeah.
But do people listening to this, do be careful, because you can't just stop your medication straight away. You have a lot of metabolic issues and insulin resistance, and even when you go onto a ketogenic carnivore diet, you can't just automatically go over and stop all your medications, because your blood sugar will have a problem, because even the blood sugar that you're making is not able to be used properly. You have to heal that insulin resistance first, and then your body will be able to use your blood sugar better. But eventually, most people are able to reduce or even eliminate their diabetes medications, and certainly have much better control. Even for type 1 diabetics, they have much, much, much
Mhm.
better control. And when people go on a ketogenic carnivore diet very early on for diabetes, sometimes they can actually not become insulin dependent, So, in fact, that was the original treatment for type 1 diabetes as well as type 2 diabetes, was a zero carbohydrate diet about 100 years ago.
Mm.
And then, Banting came up with insulin. They found, discovered insulin with his partner, and they found that, they try to get this out to everybody. And then it was just like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. Just give insulin and give carbohydrates. You still want carbohydrates. You have to give insulin, all this sort of stuff. So, the way we treated diabetes ended up getting sort of thrown by the wayside once we were able to isolate insulin, and that's just sort of put us down the wrong path. But when type 1 diabetics are just going on a ketogenic carnivore diet early on, some of them, at least, when their beta islet cells aren't completely destroyed, seem to be able to recover. And that makes sense. If we're thinking of this as an autoimmune issue, then it is the case that I've seen that autoimmune issues respond extremely well to ketogenic
Mhm.
carnivore diets, and especially just the red meat and water diet. We've been treating autoimmune issues since the 1800s in America with a pure red meat and water diet, with Dr. J.H. Salisbury, who first put this forward. And he was in the 1800s reversing rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, gout, and even helping people with tuberculosis and other sorts of issues. So, that doesn't surprise me at all. And if you because from what I can see, autoimmune issues are your body responding and reacting to these plant toxins or other sort of inappropriate chemicals that get in our body, and you make antibodies towards them, and then you get cross reaction in your body. Or that these toxins that get in the body, like lectins, can actually attack your body, can attack your thyroid, can attack different parts of your body, your joints, etc. And then your body is that now trying to protect you, and attack that complex of this thing attacking your tissue. Either way, if you just reduce or eliminate out the the incorrect foods and just eat, fatty red meat and water, those antibodies just come right down. I don't think it's treating the symptoms. I think it's the underlying cause that we're treating here. That your body's reacting to these different compounds that aren't supposed to be in your body. And when you eliminate those things, your body stops reacting. And so you stop getting this cross reaction, you stop getting this damage to your body. And so, I mean, I have probably over 100 patients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is autoimmune disease that attacks the thyroid. We can measure those antibodies very easily.
Antibodies. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we see them, they're in the hundreds, in the thousands, and you put them on a red meat and water diet, and all of a sudden they're in half, and now it's a quarter, and now it's an eighth, and now they're gone, right? And that happens in every single patient that I've ever seen. Every single patient that I've had on that is willing to go on and maintain a pure beef, lamb, and water diet, antibodies just come right down, and eventually will go down to zero. Sometimes with Hashimoto's, depending on how high the numbers are, it can take over a year, up to around 2 years even sometimes, to come all the way down, but it's getting better all the time. And that can happen with other autoimmune issues as well, including type 1 diabetes. And so if you suppress if you just stop, get rid of those antibodies right away, and you still have part of your pancreas still working and making insulin, or have the potential to recover, then potentially you can come off of it. And I'm now seeing more cases of this, where someone who's 16 all of a sudden develops type 1 diabetes, and their parents say, no, we're just going to go straight ketogenic carnivore sort of thing. And I spoke to a father, must have been 2 months ago, and he said that his son was in that situation. He got him straight onto a ketogenic carnivore diet really within a couple months, and now a year and a half down the track, he's off insulin. And so he's not even insulin dependent anymore. And his doctor
did recover completely. Yeah.
He did recover completely. Yeah. You have to get in that honeymoon period. You have to get it right at the beginning. Long term, I haven't really seen anybody reverse that, but in animal models, we actually are seeing that, where you go on a high fat meat based ketogenic diet in mice, and they can actually regrow their beta islet cells. Now they're probably all going to be in that honeymoon period because they damage their beta islet cells for the purposes of this study, and then they put them on the diet, right? So it's still very fresh, so potentially there's still something that can recover, but and obviously they're a different form of life than we are, but it's encouraging anyway from those animal studies, and also in these isolated human or anecdotal sort of cases. It's very inspiring as well. But either way, even if you never regrow any of your beta islet cells naturally, your requirement for insulin is going to be much reduced, and you can have much better control, much less likelihood of getting hypos and misdosing, and you just have a much easier time dealing with your disease, and it makes things a lot easier all around.
Yeah. It is amazing, and it still is going to be great. I'm also very curious how it's going to continue in the future, because I think nobody can hide us anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to get more and more public. How people recover from their diseases, just no matter what it is. It's really amazing. Yeah. And I would like to ask you, how do you actually work with patients who really have problems with the switch from the SAD diet to going just carnivore? I've got the feeling there are sometimes people who really struggle, and then they of course start Googling, and then they say, okay, well, Paul Saladino eats tons of fruit. Maybe I need it too. And he said he couldn't survive. And then they very often the people just fall off the wagon. They just don't, they just can't stick to it. And sometimes my advice, I'm just at the end of it, to be honest too. Of course, then there are the questions about electrolytes, whether they need to supplement some electrolytes, or they've got cramps, or they just feel too tired. What do you tell these people? Do you just say, just go through and keep completely strict, or do you say, okay, do this and that for the transition phase?
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys.
So it really comes down to how you sort of discuss this with the patient and how you introduce it to them, and how you lead up to the recommendation of trying this. Quite often it will come up in conversation and people talking about, what they're eating, what they're doing, and the different sorts of things. And it might come up that way. But one of the ways that it can often come up is, when I see a patient and they come in, they have X number of issues, and we talk about, their history and go through an exam and try to figure out exactly what the problem is, and that they're experiencing, or at least the symptoms of the problem that they're experiencing, and the things that they'd like to address. And then we often do a very, very thorough battery of tests, blood tests, metabolic tests, possibly scans, if it's appropriate. And then we bring all that back, and then I can go through them, and I say, okay, well, look, you have insulin resistance. Your insulin should really never be above 9, but your insulin is 35 at fasting. One gentleman's was up to 72, which should never be above 9.
Wow.
And so, and it's 72 fasting. And so when he was eating, it was going up much, much, much higher than that. And, now he was showing signs of diabetes, and his blood sugar was not being controlled, and he didn't even know that. And so it's, so you talk about that, and you talk about how, okay, look, this can be reversed with carbohydrates. Diabetes really isn't a disease. It's really carbohydrate poisoning. It's carbohydrate toxicity, essentially. And there are other things that can cause insulin resistance. I mean, seed oils, linoleic acid, these sorts of things, they have been shown to damage the mitochondria and damage your body's utilization, metabolism of energy, and can cause insulin resistance, requiring more and more and more insulin to get the same effect. And so you talk about that, and you say, look, this is just coming from eating sugar, from eating carbs, this is from alcohol. Look, your liver function tests are off. You have fatty liver disease. This is from, how do we get fatty liver disease in animals? How do we get foie gras? We stuff a feeding tube down a duck's throat and pour grains down it. Okay, so how do you get it in humans? Why is this a question? Like, why don't we know this, right? It's from, excessive carbohydrates and alcohol and sugar and things like that, because sugar metabolizes into the same byproducts and fat that alcohol does. You get a fatty droplet when you metabolize both fructose and alcohol, and that's how you build up fatty liver in these patients very quickly. But excess carbohydrates can potentially do this as well. We know this because we do this to ducks, we do this to geese, and we see that, right? And so you just talk about that, and you point that out, and you look at, okay, your testosterone is lower than it should be, and this can be affected, by, again, insulin and all these other sorts of things. Insulin is very, very important. People say, like, well, your blood sugar goes up and insulin goes up, and that drives energy into the cells. That's a normal process. Yeah, it's normal down here at normal levels, normal physiological levels. But when you start getting super physiological levels of your glucose, you have to have super physiological levels of insulin to drive that down. But now insulin has a very long half-life, and so it takes a while for that to come down. And if it were only affecting blood sugar, then that would be one thing, but it doesn't. It affects over 100 different processes throughout the body, and carbohydrate metabolism is probably least among them. And so when it goes up artificially because it's having to deal with this blood sugar issue, because it's toxic to the body, now it's out of balance, and it's affecting all those 100 different mechanisms, 100 plus different mechanisms, inappropriately. And then you start getting these swings, these ups, these downs, these ups, these downs. That's really going to mess up your physiology and metabolism, and all these different processes in your body. But now you start getting insulin resistance. So now even fasting, it's higher. Even fasting, now it's 20, now it's 30, now it's 40, now it's 50, now it's 72. Like that patient that I had back in January, who, by the way, after 6 months on a ketogenic carnivore diet, his fasting insulin went from 72 to 35. It was a massive, massive drop. That doesn't happen with medication. You don't get those results with medication. If you could describe all the benefits of ketogenic carnivore diets and say, here's the pill for this. I mean, it would be off the shelves, it'd be flying off the shelves. Like no one would, you just, and you could, prove that this was doing the case, or even, have a strong, strong suspicion it was doing this sort of thing. It'd be the best-selling drug in human history. So why don't we just do this with diet, right? So, you can preface these sorts of things. So you're looking at their blood, you're looking at things, and you can actually tell them, I can tell them what's going wrong and why based on what they're eating, and say, this is causing your problems, insulin resistance and carbohydrates and all these other things. You just need to get rid of these sorts of things. These will all sort themselves out. Your hormones will improve. Your testosterone will come up for men. Your testosterone may go down for women because, sometimes people have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, because higher insulin levels actually block the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. And so you get too much testosterone, not enough estrogen, and this is the leading cause of infertility in women. And then you just stop eating carbohydrates, it goes away. And PCOS is actually now being called type 4 diabetes, type 3 diabetes being Alzheimer's, because you get insulin resistance of the brain, which is not is not where you want it. And so, you talk about all these sorts of things and you preface all of these, and they have autoimmune issues, and say, well, listen, this is what I think, plants have these toxins, and they have things called lectins, and they're thought that this is what our body's actually responding to and making antibodies towards. And then the lucky few that have the right genetics, they end up getting these autoimmune issues, and you're getting this cross reaction with your body. And the way to treat that is you get rid of all plants and you just go on a pure red meat and water diet like they've been doing since the 1800s. And those antibodies come down, and I track them and I measure them, and they do go down. And you tell these people this, and they just go like, wow, okay, all right. So what do I eat? I was like, okay, well, you eat, the best thing to do is eat the most biologically appropriate diet. All animals have a species specific diet. It's something that's appropriate for their biology, and plants have toxins, and you go through all that. And you talk about how it's really important to only eat the plants that your species are designed to eat. And we haven't really been eating plants for more than 10,000 years in some populations, the Native Americans, Native Australians, the Sub-Saharan Africans, people, all other parts of the world. They've been eating meat up until the last century or two. And so they have no time at all to adapt to these plant toxins. Our ancestors would have had 8 to 10,000 years. That's still a blink of the eye in the course of evolution. And so that's just not long enough. And so while European populations will get these diseases, the native populations that have only more recently come to an agrarian style diet, they get it much, much, much more quickly because they don't have as many defenses built up. Even in that 10,000 years, at least it's something, but we still get the diseases. It's delayed a bit. Whereas the Native Americans, Native Australians, etc., they have a far higher rate of chronic disease, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, all these other sorts of things when eating a Western diet, but only when eating a Western diet. Okay, what's a non-Western diet? It's a carnivore diet. It's meat, and so it's you point all this stuff out to people, and if you do it right, you get them to the point of saying like, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to try that. And most of them do. And at the very least, you can get them on eating more meat and understanding that that's really important. Their B12 is just absolutely bottomed out, and that can cause brain damage. You have your B12 in, I believe, Germany uses the same units as Australia and the UK, which is below 400 is an actual clinical deficiency. You can actually get demyelination of your axons and get nerve damage and brain damage from doing this. Oxford had a study in 2008 that looked at B12, and people that were sort of under this level, and certainly under 320, 330, they found that those patients, they took MRIs every single year. And after 5 years, their brains had shrunk by 5% volume, right? So, but most of these reference ranges go down to 130, 150, but below 400, you can actually get nerve damage, right? So, you show this to your patient, you say, oh, my B12 is fine. No, your B12 is 200. Like that's actually that's a severe deficiency. In fact, you want that above 800. You want that to be between 800 and 1200. Well, that's off the scale. The scale only goes up to 650. Right. Scale is wrong. The scale is an average for the community. It's not we use this as doctors and patients. We say, oh, we want it. That's the range. That's where we want to be. You want to be in that range. Why do you want to be in that range? Is that the optimal range? No, that's just the average this year. Well, hold on a second. Then why do we have to be in that range? Well, because that's the average, and you want to be in that average range. Well, no, but this is a nutritional deficiency, right? You should have a level that's like, this is a deficiency, and this is where you need to be above it. And we actually have those numbers, and that's actually right in the middle of this range. So why are we using that range instead of the optimal range? Well, it's just the range we use. Okay, well, it's the wrong range.
Yeah. And of
And
course,
so,
in some cases, we don't know what the average range is. Yeah.
yeah.
What,
Well,
or what? No, what the ideal range should
ideal
be.
range. Yeah. It's interesting. In Germany, they actually did studies where they took men and women in their 20s, average 25, and normal BMI, and no diagnosed medical issues. Normal, healthy young adults, right? That's pretty
Rare.
low bar, right? Well, it's rare now, yeah. But that should be what's normal, right? So they looked at those reference ranges, that even at that average range, massively different reference range. And so when you look at that and you compare things to a healthy 25-year-old who doesn't have any medical issues and is normal BMI, massively different, because right now we're just getting the average for the community. Every couple of years, every lab on earth will have different reference ranges. Every lab in the same town will have different reference ranges, as long as they're owned by different companies. And they renorm these reference ranges every few years. Okay. And so those reference ranges are just getting lower and lower and lower. The B12 levels are going lower and lower and lower. So in England, in the UK, I've spoken to people over there, and they were saying that the reference range goes up to 540, and it goes down to 130. But at their own University of Oxford, they found that, under 400, under 330 for sure, that was a clear deficiency that could cause the shrinkage of the brain and really brain and nerve damage. So how are they using that reference range where it goes down to 130, 150 and only goes up to 540? So, we're not using the data that's available to us. And so, when you point this out to patients and you say, look, these reference ranges are all wrong, and you start writing in the normal reference ranges, they start seeing just how off these things are. And I think that's probably just that simple change of just using optimal reference ranges instead of just average reference range, because the average person is sick. 90% of Westerners have at least one metabolic disease. 70% of people are overweight or obese. You're getting, and who goes in to get blood tests? It's not the healthy people that come in and say, hey, let's get a good average. It's just whoever the hell comes in. So who gets blood tests? It's people that are sick, the people that their doctors are sending in because they have a problem. The majority of people are actually having issues, and then they get sent into the doctor, and they're like, oh, okay, well, this is the normal range. No, these people are sick. That's a normal range for sick people who are metabolically unwell, and could be old or young or malnourished, or it doesn't matter. They're just, oh, that's just the normal range. No, it's not the normal range. And so just using an optimal range, if we could agree on something that's optimal from research and norms of healthy young adults, then I think that would just in itself revolutionize medicine, because now you'd have doctors that would come in, send someone off for blood tests, and they say, oh, I'm feeling tired, I'm having these problems. Oh, but your B12 is fine, so I guess it's not that. No, it's 200. That's a problem. And if you understood, and if that was 200, but you knew that should be above 800 or above 1100 in America, then you would look at that and you'd see all these red numbers. And, oh my God, oh God, that's horrible. And you'd have something to go with. You have something to go on. You actually try to be able to help people get back in normal ranges, and even just that could help significantly. The native populations that have only more recently come to an agrarian style diet, they get it much more quickly because they don't have as many defenses built up. Even in that 10,000 years, at least it's something. But we still get the diseases. It's delayed a bit. There was the Native Americans, Native Australians, etc. They have a far higher rate of chronic disease, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, all these other sorts of things when eating a